Hello, welcome to the October meeting of the Transportation, Public Safety, and the Environment. There's one more aspect of the committee, but that is the committee of
Sanitation.
Committee Board 3. And which is it?
Sanitation.
Sanitation, thank you. Yeah, I would like to ask people to sign in the chat. If you're affiliated with an organization, mention that there. Generally, we're going to use the chat just for that purpose. Reach out perhaps if there's technical difficulties, but let's not have discussion back and forth in the chat. It's not actually part of the meeting. So the first item on the agenda is the approving of the minutes. If there are any, does anyone on the committee have modifications to the minutes from last month? Hearing none, those are approved. Could we have a roll call for attendance?
Yes. David Crane.
Here.
Joshua Waterman here. Wendy Lee.
She's out today.
Okay. Lee Berman.
Here.
Tariq Darrell. Not seeing Tariq. Kenyelle Hernandez.
Here.
Michelle Cooper Smith.
Present.
David Louie.
Here.
And July Yang. Not seeing July.
Okay.
Did you call
So-
Richard? Did you call Richard?
Richard's just a board member who's attending.
No, he's not. He
On
was,
the committee now?
yes, he's on the committee and a revised list was sent.
Oh, excellent. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got 3 big items of agenda tonight, and the district needs. So we're going to take the proposed bus layover, which is south of it's on East First Street on the south side of that street. It would involve a few other changes. Now, a few months ago, we had this at committee, and when we got to full board, we asked, and MTA had agreed to come back to committee. We rejected it at full board because there was the route to get there involved turning onto 4th Street, and buses were getting caught. So we put it back on tonight's agenda, and Susan, we met about this, and I'm unclear about what agency was going to speak.
MTA, and they're here. We have a couple of people from MTA.
Okay, so MTA is going to explain to us that turn is what I believe is going to happen now. If you're ready, do you need to present or okay?
Right.
Sure.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Ernest Monterelli. I'm the Assistant Director of Government Community Relations for MTA. I'm joined tonight by Luke DePalma, who's also of Government Community Relations with MTA. Laura, sorry if I mispronounced your name, Aziz Sain, who's one of our bus planners, and Buckley Young. And we're here to present, as David had already mentioned, on East First Street and East First Avenue curb regulation change for an MTA bus layover. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to give you a short presentation.
Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Absolutely. Here you go.
Thank you.
You should be able to now.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry. You can all see that, right? Can you all see it?
Not yet.
No.
Oh, strange. Okay, let's try something else here. Okay.
There you go. Good now.
Alrighty. Okay. So I would just want to go through the presentation one more time in case you need a refresh, since it's been a few months since we last discussed this. Just to get us situated, we're looking at East First Street between Houston and First Avenue. There's currently a dining shed on the north curb and alternate side parking, as well as metered parking and a taxi stand on the south curb. Whoops. Okay. We're requesting the south curb of East First Street be designated as a layover and staging space for the M15 SBS, Sim 1 and Sim 34 buses during weekday rush hours only. Layovers are scheduled time in between trips that help us keep buses on schedule and provide time for operators to use the restroom if necessary. Layover time is built into every trip, and layovers are often, but not always, located adjacent to a bus's last or first stop. So on weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m., the layover, let's see, would serve approximately 25 15 SBS trips that terminate at Houston Street and then go back in service northbound with their first stop at First Avenue and East First Street. This is done by design, as those buses are needed to meet customer demand farther uptown. On weekdays from 4 to 7, the Sim 1 and Sim 34 express buses would use the same street to stage before going into service for their afternoon trips. These buses travel from their depots in Staten Island and need to kind of factor in traffic conditions and delays in order to arrive on time and get those trips started on time. So staging at a layover is really critical to their operations. In case you're wondering what these buses are doing now, the M15 has a designated layover in front of what was the landmark Sunshine Theater. It was for years occupied by construction, and even so was insufficient. So the buses tend to either hang out at their last stop on Houston Street, right near Forsyth, and end up blocking that bus stop, or they kind of end up at the first bus stop on First Avenue and First Street. And the Sims also have an issue of having insufficient bus layover at their designated space. So they've just been looking to increase that space. We saw an opportunity to have kind of both of those needs at this one location. So just to talk a little bit about the taxi stand, because that was we thought that might be an issue of concern. The existing taxi stand would move to the north curb, and it currently occupies 178 feet on the south curb. And so in order to preserve that length, it would kind of be split on either side of that driveway on the north curb. So we would not reduce the number of taxis that could be accommodated. Actually, we might be able to fit an extra taxi there at the taxi stand. We met with a representative for the taxi workers who use that stand, and they were okay with this proposed relocation. And we also stopped in on the businesses on this block and just let them know of the plan and didn't hear any objections. So the turnaround. Currently, the M15 accesses the layover on East First Street when it can reach that layover by turning north on First Avenue, east on East 4th Street, south on Avenue A, and then turning again on Houston to kind of turn into East First Street. We understand that you have concerns about the bus using East 4th Street for its turnaround. So we're currently using this routing for some buses. We do use that layover when we're able to access it. And you know, we operate buses on this block right now, but we understand that you have concerns. So we're here to hear them tonight.
Okay, that's all, Laura, right? That's the whole presentation?
Yeah, I guess
Right,
so.
so now we turn it back to the committee for their questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the problem that keeps being observed and that we actually have photographic evidence of is buses not able to make that turn onto 4th Street successfully. So what analysis was done that it is sufficient? And I mean, I'm pretty sure that you're going to say that that it is sufficient. So I'm curious as to why you believe that the buses are actually not making it around that corner.
Do we have anybody from DOT on at this meeting?
I didn't see
We did
them.
not, we did
Hi,
not.
yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Jackie.
Jackie's here.
Yes, hi,
Jackie.
Jackie from DOT. Yep, so David, to speak to that question, DOT's engineers did conduct a fleet path analysis for the turn on 4th Street and First Avenue, and they found that buses would be able to make that turn without daylighting on the north side.
Right. So if it were me driving the bus, I would miss it every single time because I've never been able to handle even a trailer on the back of a car. So yeah, I guess I would say that I wonder if your margin of error though is too small even for, stop it, even for good bus drivers. Let's take some other committee members. First Susan and then Michelle have their hands up. I see Richard too.
Okay, so 2 things. One, I wanted to know the clearance between, you're saying it's able to make it. How much leeway exactly is there between, you know, what is allowed and what you observed? And the other thing is, we know that you've done the study and that it can make the turn. We also know that sometimes it doesn't make the turn because we've documented that. I have also recently seen a turn from 4th Street onto Avenue A. I wish I'd had my camera because it's articulated. Regular buses can do it, but because it's articulated, when it turns, it actually blocks off 2 crosswalks and traffic going in well, at the minimum, it stops 2 crosswalks, and it does stop the traffic on 4th Street while it's turning. Also, Richard sent in, and I think Josh has those available, a bunch of photographs showing the everyday conditions on that street, which is a lot of trucks double parking. That was true when I came home tonight at 5:30. There was a big truck double parked unloading packages. So we have a lot of delivery trucks with deliveries because of the huge amount of residents there, but also a lot of 18-wheelers because of Key Food on the corner, particularly in the mornings, that don't have any place to park. So they kind of park all over. So I would like to hear the clearance between, you know, what's allowed and what exists, and, you know, how to deal with all those other situations. And, you know, also, you know, I'm say Richard sent a lot of photographs of everyday existing conditions.
Yeah, so, you know, the team did conduct the fleet path analysis using the standards that we have. I don't have the specifics on what, you know, those clearance numbers are, so I can definitely check in with the team and, you know, get those back to you, but I don't have them off the top of mind, unfortunately.
Michelle.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think to what Susan said, I feel like we often have this problem with assessments by DOT is that there's like an ideal version of the assessment if all the conditions are perfect. But in reality on the street, there's a lot of impositions, like Susan described, the double parking trucks, like people parking poorly, like, you know, 1 million actual like street conditions that impede these types of what I believe is a very tight turn. So I guess my question is, why would you not consider daylighting, even if like technically they can make the turn? Why would you not daylight?
And so people understand daily
So maybe,
to move
Remove a couple of parking
space at the
spots. Yeah.
corner so that there's more turning radius. Yeah.
yep, so I think I just would want to clarify, we looked into the turn without daylighting. I don't think we've necessarily, you know, made a decision not to daylight. We were just, you know, in the analysis that we did it as it is now and saw that the buses were able to make the turn without the daylighting.
I mean, I would, so, okay, just to follow up. So, but again, like under perfect conditions, probably, which it seems like that's often not the case. And Richard lives right there and can probably provide additional context, but I don't see why you wouldn't like at least consider daylighting as a step to make it easier for everyone there. That's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Richard.
Definitely, I can take that back.
Hi, David. MTA folks, I am new to the committee, but I am not new to the community board. the picture that the MTA put up is indeed what Michelle says is an ideal. You must have taken this on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m. because you could see straight down to Avenue C, for Pete's sake, with no cars. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, I was standing out in the middle of that street, closer to Avenue A, facing west. And as I was facing west and as the light changed, a flow of cars and other vehicles came down from 2nd Avenue through 1st Avenue, heading down to Avenue A. They cluttered up the whole block. It was at least 6, 7 cars in a row that came down. If you look at the picture that's up on the screen, I happen to live on the right side of that picture in that building. I am a resident of Village View and I'm a member of their board of directors. So I know this street, I know the flow of traffic, I know the M15 because I essentially used it every day when I was working. I've seen the good and bad and the ugly on the M15. Question that I have, or several questions that I have. Given the width of 4th Street between 1st and A, it becomes a thoroughfare for police, fire, sanitation, and ambulances. Has the MTA reached out to any of those city agencies concerning the use of emergency vehicles on that street? Because it's going to be a problem if the fire department, the police department, and sanitation department come by. Sanitation is a particular problem because on the left side of that picture, in the middle of those trees, is the garbage collection area for Village View on a very regular basis. I don't know what the collection basis is, but on a regular basis, you will see one of the large sanitation trucks showing up. On occasion, I have seen 2. Guess what 2 sanitation trucks on the street does? It jams it up really badly. The proposed route is going through a residential area. That's going to affect the health and safety of 4 Village View buildings, and you can just about see them all in your picture. The one on the left, the one in the middle, the one further south on the left, and my building on the right. That's over 800 apartments. At the end of that block is a residence that's been there for decades, might have been even longer than my development has been there, called Egeloff Towers. It happens to be the home of our assemblyman, Harry Epstein.
Harvey.
Right, Harvey, sorry. Across the street from Egeloff, as Susan mentioned, there is Key Food. Over time, Village View has evolved into a NORC. And for the MTA folks who are not familiar with the term, it's a naturally occurring retirement community, which means we have a substantial number of senior citizens with their walkers, with their wheelchairs, et cetera, crossing those intersections and going down to Key Food on Avenue A. This poses a problem. In the middle of the block, right past my building, on the right-hand side of that picture, is PS 63. Guess what PS 63 has in it? It has a whole bunch of children. They have a schoolyard, and immediately adjacent to it, they have a playground that they use. In addition, the teachers use this block. There is space allocated for teacher vehicles. We're concerned that this is going to impact the health and safety of the children in PS 63. Additionally, Avenue A, as Susan mentioned, it is a busy 2-way street with constant big truck deliveries to Key Food and other businesses. I don't know what prompted the MTA to look at this block in this way, but your ideal picture is just that. It's an ideal. It's not a realistic picture.
So,
And if you stood there and looked at it, you would see what the reality was. There are alternates to the MTA proposal. You could let the buses lay over on 1st Avenue between 1st Street and 2nd Street. I gather you've considered that in the past. You could let the buses go down across Houston Street, go down to Avenue A. There's a left turn lane there. They could make the U-turn and go to the layover area that you showed on your schematic. This would allow the bus drivers to make the turn with only one turn instead of 4 turns, as is proposed under your plan. Finally, you could let the buses stay on Houston Street. I'm sorry for the location on Houston Street, but they've been laying over in that area for decades, not months, not years, for decades. Thank you.
Thank you. So the MTA wants to reply?
Well, I was going to just jump in and say that we started the conversation, there was concern from the board about the geometry of the street and whether or not the bus could physically make the turn based on the dimensions of the street. But it sounds like the concern is more that there are too many conflicting uses on the street, not whether or not the street is wide enough, but there are too many uses that are not the bus, and you don't want the bus on 4th Street officially because it will just add more use to the street that you feel is already too crowded. Is that correct?
No,
That's what Richard is describing.
Yes, that is correct.
I thought I heard that from a couple others.
Well,
also-
a couple of us are concerned about, that it's actually not making the turn all the time. There are other uses on the street as well that Richard was describing. But Susan and I were discussing the inability to turn onto the block adequately. Miss Susan?
I also at the last meeting did talk about the other uses on the street, and I particularly mentioned the double park. I actually had a photograph of double park school buses there, and I did discuss 3rd Street and 4th Street being the only emergency responder streets that go through, because I know DOT in a further conversation acknowledged that to me. So we did have those conversations before. All of the above are concerned. We did see a bus not make it, so we know it can make it, but we also know that sometimes it doesn't make it. And I would also say, I don't think daylighting would help it not get stuck like the one time we saw, but it would not make it safe enough to use because articulated buses, when they turn, do a block off 2 different crosswalks and traffic.
Yes. So are there other committee? I see 2 hands still up. One is Susan. And Buckley, did you have something you wanted to add? Are there other committee members who are wanting to ask questions before I go to the public? Is there people from the public? There's the one woman on the phone. Sound like a woman on the phone? Other people? You can raise your Zoom hand. It's easier for me. I actually don't see, that was a 212 number that had joined earlier. I see one ending in 967. Go ahead. There may not be anybody from the public interested in speaking tonight.
We must have lost the woman on the phone.
Right. Unless they're having difficulty figuring out how to unmute on a phone, which I think is *6.
Unmuted before.
Committee. Okay, if you can unmute, well, they're not asking, I don't believe. They were Village View anyway. Oh, Village View, I'm sorry.
Hello, can
Thank
you
you.
hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I live on Avenue A and 4th Street in Village View. And I'm concerned because it's going to come down the block and going to make the turn. And I can hear that all day. I can hear it when it comes down because I face, looking out my living room, I face 1st Avenue. So I face 4th Street. And what Richard Rofiak mentioned, we have fire engines, ambulance a lot that I could see out my window, park in the middle right across from the school. And there's the gate where the kids, there's a playground like you had mentioned earlier, somebody mentioned, and the playground is open and the kids play there and they can, for ball, they're playing after a recess or the hours in between where the buses are going to come down. a ball or something they're playing could run to the street and the kids can go and find the ball, and something with the buses coming along, and an accident can happen. And as it was said, we have a lot of seniors with their walkers, wheelchairs, and scooters. And I'm concerned about the garbage that is posted every twice a week. We have the regular garbage bags, and also furniture is put in the middle of the street, on the curb, near the curb, but out in the middle of the street that gets picked up. So I'm really concerned, as being a resident on 4th Street, that maybe the MTA can think of another way of finding a place instead of coming down 4th Street. There's a lot of minuses to do down 4th Street. Besides, there's the Egloff Towers, which is a larger apartment building, which was said. We have Village View. Avenue A is a two-way street. You got bikes coming, and I could foresee some kind of accident's going to happen with that bus if it turns on 4th Street going to Houston Street. I'm very concerned about that. And if the MTA can look into something else, I appreciate it. As it was said, did they look at it in a better way of doing something that doesn't impact the neighborhood and the people living there?
Laura Buckley, can you speak to why we picked 4th Street in this routing a little more?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Buckley Young. I'm the Director of Bus Service Planning for Manhattan and the Bronx. Thank you for everyone's comments tonight. I think they're very helpful to hear these concerns. If I can just talk a little bit about how buses operate, and clarify that we're only requesting to have our buses only making the short turn across 4th Street in the morning hours between approximately 6:30 to 10 a.m. That's when we have the M15 buses short turn here, because in a northbound direction, this first stop that's going northbound on 1st Avenue is one of our busiest stops in the morning. And so in order to serve that stop, it's filled with school kids, people going to work. We short turn up to 24 buses in the mornings to serve the stop more directly. We have looked at many other options to short turn the route, to use another street, but all of those are not really ideal for various reasons. If we short turn the bus across St. Mark's Place, we could come down 2nd Avenue, cut across St. Mark's, but then we'd be missing this very important first stop here. We could go further south to turn around, but those options entail extra costs for us, and we're trying to minimize maximize our resources and not waste it on extra mileage for the bus that's not necessary. It doesn't help the bus to go longer than it needs to, and it's not in service. And yes, we also looked at maintaining what we do now, which is basically use a stop on Houston, but that blocks. We don't want to block that bus stop with buses laying over there, because there are other buses. The M21 bus uses that bus stop. The other M15 buses that go down further south uses that bus stop. So if we have 2 buses laying there, we just block those people from accessing the through buses.
But could I interrupt? Isn't it safety for the neighborhood?
Excuse me.
Yeah, if we could, let's listen to.
Is it safety?
Excuse me.
Can you hear me?
We'd like you to not speak at the moment. I recognize the public earlier. We're now hearing from the agency, and I'm gonna go back to the committee in a moment.
Can I summarize Buckley's comments?
Thank you.
Yes. Is it safety for the neighborhood with all these?
We're asking you
With
to
the-
not speak, please. We're not
Okay.
being recognized to
Sorry.
speak. Thank you. Someone wanted to summarize.
Yeah. So Buckley, and correct me if I'm wrong, so you're saying this would be done in the morning hours, and it's important to be able to turn around in this location or in this vicinity? in order to make the service that we need for the morning. And laying over on First Avenue would be a negative impact to other bus operations. Is that correct?
No, laying over in Houston, where we have an existing stop for the M21 and for the buses that go down to South Ferry from M15. It means that if that bus stop is occupied by two buses that are short turning here, a bus that comes to the stop would have to stop in the travel lane, blocking traffic, and sometimes the customer can't see the bus.
And when
Can I-
Buckley talks about just added costs, it's tens of thousands of dollars in just the operations every year, just to send the bus not in service down. I think we would have to go all the way down to Grand to be able to turn back around. So that would impact our operations and meeting service for our customers. And that's additional burden on the community at large, having the buses on the streets going around, not picking up customers, wasting limited resources in order to do that route. So we had looked at alternatives to this location.
And also the U-turn that was mentioned at Avenue A. Our union does not support making U-turns.
The U-turn is banned, actually.
It's banned.
Yeah, we
That
looked at a
U-turn is
lot of
banned.
different, we looked at a lot of different turnarounds. We tried to find a different way to access this location. The truth is, this 4th Street is wider than the other streets in the neighborhood. So concerns about, traffic backing up or one double parked school bus, sanitation truck, delivery truck blocking traffic would be a greater concern on a narrower street.
Can I ask for clarification of the spot on Houston you mentioned where the M21 would be impacted? Is that in front of the old Sunshine Theater, that spot?
No,
it's not.
in
It's
front of the park.
One block before, in front of the park.
Okay.
The old stop, the old layover.
No, it's
It's-
not the old, it sounds like it's not the old layover.
No, the
Well,
layover
this is
and
before.
the was separate. It's not the same as the stop. The layover was in front of the Sunshine Theater.
Have
And
you looked at resurrecting that stop and using that?
yes, we have, but that block, as Lars mentioned earlier, it's already too short for. It can only fit one bus, if at all. It's already too short. So, but now it has a partial bike lane on it.
Yeah.
And there's also a restaurant structure, outdoor seating at the front of the block in the
Restaurants,
roadway.
it's illegal restaurant structure, but the bus lane and bike lane, I think, would prohibit it.
But even if we were to able to get that back, it would be insufficient. It only allows for one bus to lay over there in that block. It's a short block.
Okay, Susan, is your hand up still?
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to say was there is a bike lane now on Houston, so I don't think it would be good to have a bus layover there. But I'm gonna push back on 4th Street. So the morning hours, the time that I took the photos of the bus that was stuck, so we know it happens, that was on the way to work just about 9. And then the other time when I observed it turning on Avenue A, that was when I was coming back from the gym around 8:30. So those are the times that, we've seen those situations. It is also the time when we have loads of 18-wheelers right at that corner, loading and unloading for Key Food, because there is no unloading space for Key Food. It is a problem, and they park right on Avenue A on that corner sometimes. So it is not good, really is not good for us.
If I could just add, actually at that corner, I think what would help our bus operations is in the northbound direction, right before 4th Street, there's a stop bar, and that stop bar is very close to the intersection. We'd like to ask DOT to reposition that stop bar further south so that there'd be more clearance for the bus to make that turn. I think that would help that turn very much.
Does anyone know what a stop bar is?
Yeah, I think that's where you're supposed to stop when the light is red. The thing that
Oh.
I have a very hard time doing that once every 3 years I actually ride a car.
It's that white bar just before the crosswalk, and cars are supposed to stop there to allow other vehicles to make turns. It improves the turning situation at the corner.
Yeah. So, Richard, you have your hand up.
Two comments. Susan touched on it in one regard in terms of the morning hours. If any of you are parents, you know that your children are going to school somewhere between the hours of 7 to 10. And what time does school get out? Somewhere between 2 and, depending on the after-school program, maybe as late as 7. So you're proposing to send your buses to save money over the potential impact on the children in our school in the area. I don't think that's a fair trade-off for the community.
It's not just money. The route that we're talking about goes all the way down to Grand, involves multiple left turns. So the buses are operating longer on city streets. So that
Well,
burden
that's
rate
the
you're
way, that's the
talking
way you
about,
see it. From Community Board 3's point of view and from the residential point of view, we see it differently. From
you see
lady,
what differently? Going down to Grand Street is a longer journey and the bus would be on the road.
that's
all
the
I'm
MTA's
saying.
problem. We don't care about the MTA's problem. We care about our problem or our.
Well, I'm just
potential problem.
refuting that it's about money. It's about safe operations, efficient operations.
The MTA is worried about efficient operation. I was curious about the young lady's comments about the U-turn on Avenue A not being feasible. I've been on the community board long enough to know that the transportation committee with past issues, none similar to this, has worked with the Department of Transportation to change signs and hours and parking, et cetera, et cetera. We're even discussing with you the possibility of flipping the side of the streets for the taxis. U-turn signs can be changed. And we could make an exception for that if the community board agreed and the MTA agreed to allow the bus to do a U-turn on Avenue A. What's the problem if that
Or
sign gets changed?
Safe operations?
Excuse me?
Is that a safe operation?
It sure as heck look that way because there's a left turn lane there.
Our union,
Trucks and buses and everybody makes that turn all the time.
right? But I think our union leadership and they are very much against U-turns. And so it would be a very hard sell to convince the union and the bus operators to make that U-turn. Of course, they need to do it at some locations where it's really necessary. Sometimes we're forced to do it, but in general, we have not been able to implement any new U-turns with the union.
Well, then you have a problem.
So Richard, I'd like to let Kenyel speak now. Kenyel?
Thanks. I was just thinking, you guys have the own bus lane. Would it be a big deal to just, or take too much time difference, just have the bus continue going straight up its allotted bus route and take 14th Street down and just come around? It would cause you guys to figure out time-wise, but just let the bus go all the way straight up to 14th Street and make the turn where that's the best way, no? Or that's also too tight.
No, it's that going from Houston to 14th Street and then turn back on 14th Street, come back down here for a layover, that would take 15 minutes. And instead of having the bus being in service, serving the customers along the route, we'll be wasting at least 15 minutes of travel time just to turn around to lay over. And that's not efficient service. And it's making the bus go on streets unnecessarily and not being in service to serving customers.
Yeah, but then what happens if you get stuck on 4th Street again? That's 15 minutes of traffic for not just the bus, but everyone stuck in that corner.
Right, from time to time, I'm sure, I'm sorry that happened. And it's most likely we had a new operator making this turn and he or she just misjudged it. But in general, we have been making this turn. Our bus operators have been making this turn. We have a dispatcher on site at the location to uh, to make sure that they can make the turn. And we have been making a turn even after Susan, you witnessed that a few months ago, because the dispatcher who's on site there in the mornings, he sees that the layover on First Street is available. And when buses come down, he directs them to that layover via East 4th Street. And we have not had any issues.
So Buckley or Laura, could you tell us what happens if they don't approve the, if we don't get this layover? What happens with the operation?
Well, we may not be able to bring those buses down to Houston Street in the morning.
That means
That's-
one of the stops would have to be cut.
Perhaps, I mean, we have to identify a location to lay over buses. This is the problem. It's a critical, layovers are, I'm sorry if I didn't stress enough the importance of a layover. It really is allowing the bus to maintain its schedule, to catch up when it's running late, to then position and be in place, to leave, to depart as close to on time, to its schedule as possible. If we're now adding extra time just to reach the layover, you've eaten into your layover time before you've even arrived and been able to park at the layover. Forget if, never mind if an operator needs to actually use the restroom and leave the bus for a few minutes. So
How about creating a layover just maybe a block or two ahead where the bus wouldn't have to turn onto any block, but just kind of go left?
well, then we miss the first stop at at First Avenue and East
Oh,
First
I
Street.
got
And
you. Okay.
yeah, and I just want to point out, I'm not sure if you caught when Buckley mentioned that is one of the busiest stops. It's in the top 5 stops for the entire route. And the hours of 7, 8, and 9 a.m. Are the hours when that stop has the most boardings. So really, the community benefits from having the bus arrive at this bus stop on time and go into service, because if we're sending the bus in circles around the neighborhood just to access its layover, now we're kind of risking the bus, making that trip on, being able to make that trip on time. And I just want to point out, I'm sorry that I see a hand raised from Phil Rella, who is he's from our road operations team. And I'm not sure if the moment passed, if his comment, I don't know if he wanted to chime in on something, but if we didn't think that we could make this turn safely, we certainly wouldn't be doing it. Our union, our operators, it is our mission to provide safe service. Our operators do not let them, don't let us give them routings that don't work, and that they feel they cannot operate safely. So I don't know if Phil wants to speak to any of the actual conditions on the ground.
Let me let Phil speak, and then we'll go back to the committee. We'll start with Josh, and I want the committee to start talking about what we want to do. Phil.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, this is Phil Reller. I'm with the Manhattan Road Operations for the buses. We've been using that term now for a very long time, and I can tell you that we don't have a problem making that turn. That one incident that occurred was from an operator that had just coming back from work after being out for several months and was unfamiliar with the routing. As road operations, we make sure that routes are safe for the operators and for the service. If we see that there is a problem that's consistent, we will go to our operations planning department and tell them this is not working. We can't use this route. It's delaying our buses. It's causing an unsafe condition. So I can tell you from experience that this is what we do on the road, boots on the ground. If we see a problem, we report it, and we're the community. We're like the liaison for the community and the MTA. We service the customers. We want the best service for the customers, and we want the buses to operate efficiently and as safe as possible. So if there's a problem, and we will put a stop to it, we'll tell them, this routing is not working. But through all this time, decades probably, we've been making this turn without a problem. Like Laura said, we have a dispatcher on the corner there that, is constantly communicating with us and letting us know, if there's a problem or not. We didn't just come up and say, okay, we're going to use 4th Street. We analyzed this street. We saw it. We know we can do it. And it was just unfortunate that one incident we had, caused this. But I can tell you for sure that street, 4th Street, is a nice wide street. The buses make the turn safely. And I think it's best for everybody. It'll serve the community the best way possible by us not allowing to use that street. Service would not be the same as it is. It would get worse. We would probably have to reduce service at that first stop. And I think you would have more complaints than just our buses going down 4th Street.
I apologize for interrupting, David, but Mr.
Hey.
Arella, I believe, misspoke. He seemed to be suggesting that they've been looking at 4th Street as a route. It's never been a route. He's only been talking about the turn from Houston onto First Avenue.
Correct, but they've been doing that for quite a long time. I mean, I understood that that was what he was referring to, Richard. Josh?
Yeah, well, thank you to the folks from the MTA for coming out. It's very clear that, obviously, I mean, this isn't just a casual idea. This is something that a lot of planning has gone into, that your agency sees as the best option. Something that has come up in our discussion is, as has been mentioned tonight, that bus that got stuck, that didn't make the turn. Phil, it seemed you mentioned that as an isolated incident. Are you able to just confirm that is the one time that has happened since this route has been running? Just that it's not obviously a regularly occurring thing, but that it was just the once, or be able to clarify how many times that has happened so far?
Yeah, that's only a one-time isolated incident. It's never happened before and hasn't happened since. It's just an unfortunate thing. The operator was, like I said, that particular operator was out for on vacation or was out for a long time, and he came back to work, and he wasn't familiar. He just had to get retrained. But that hasn't happened since, and that was just an isolated incident.
Understood. Then David, to your question, I mean, if we're getting into this part of the discussion, it seems like we should pass this. I think that's where I stand. That's all I'll say for now.
Other committee members want to weigh in? We actually do have a motion from last month, which had the facts laid out, and we can talk about what to do. So other committee members are debating now.
A
Michelle?
last comment. I listened to what Mr. Young said and with what Ms. Azzi Singh said about Avenue A. Mr. Young particularly said something about the union. I would like the MTA to consider touching base with the union and talking to them and getting their thought about that particular proposal. Because in all candor, I think that's the better solution to your problem. It allows you to continue to use First Street, and it eliminates the problem of going through a residential and very heavily trafficked neighborhood.
Okay, before I recognize it, I'm just gonna say, I can't imagine a U-turn out of the left turn bay. You're on Houston, you're left turn bay going on to Avenue A, and you do a U-turn on Houston. That's
Take a
what.
look at it, David.
I just can't imagine that actually working.
it's-
Maybe could consider it, but
It's currently prohibited, so we would need, that's the discussion. DOT would have to even open that up.
understand. So now Michelle and Lee have had their hands up. Michelle?
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'll just echo what Josh said. I mean, it's clear that this is a situation that has been deeply studied. There was one edge incident that happened. I mean, things happen all the time that are out of the norm. So I think that, in every policy choice, there are some negatives potentially, but I mean, I think that the neighborhood would be best served by continuing the level of service that's needed and not, harming a busy stop. I also have taken the M15 for work many times, and I don't think that anyone would want to have fewer buses. I can't tell you how often I see people waiting on the side of the street for it in the morning. So I trust that the planners here have made the most intelligent decision, and I don't really see how we can, as non-transportation planners without information about it, make really bones about that. So thanks.
Lee?
Sure. The comment about this being a one-time event where that bus got stuck there, I think we have to recognize there are going to be new operators on occasion. You know, everybody gets trained on every route, and so this may happen again. But that being said, if the MTA could explain the safety concern about the U-turn that Richard had suggested, and actually I'm a little confused as to where Richard is suggesting this U-turn. But if the MTA can explain why they are either prohibiting their drivers from making a U-turn on Houston, what the purpose of that is, I'd appreciate it.
Sure thing. I can just jump in quickly and say that the turn is currently prohibited by a DOT sign. There's a sign that shows no U-turn allowed, so we wouldn't be able to go in violation of a sign. Maybe if DOT wanted to study allowing it, but I think that would be a bigger question of a signal study, because you'd want a dedicated signal timing for that turn, because think about having to U-turn a bus with a traffic coming in the other direction towards you, sometimes at a higher rate of speed than it should be. The traffic going in the other direction, coming towards the bus trying to make a U-turn, it's just setting us up for, potential problems.
But it could be no U-turns except for buses. And if Richard, please explain if it's a U-turn on Houston up to Avenue A and then westbound, that left turn is already an extended left turn light for left turns only, and the bus in theory I would think could make that U-turn during that period of time. And where else would this U-turn be, Richard?
That's exactly what you're saying, Lee. It's Allen Street flowing north to Avenue A is where that U-turn is. And as I mentioned earlier, and as the MTA has recognized, approaching the DOT to change that sign would be a bureaucratic thing, but it's not an overcome thing. And again, these are flexible buses. You have not heard the MTA say they cannot make a U-turn there. They just say they would prefer not to, and they don't know if the union would go along with it.
Okay, then David, I would just request that I'm still trying to envision what all the corners here are. In my head, I'm looking at Essex and Avenue A, and I know that turn, and that's an extended turn. Maybe if there's no U-turn there, but I would actually, I think, be in favor for the DOT to get back to us to confirm whether or not they could make a no U-turns except buses safely, instead of doing the East 4th Street trip. And if not, then I would have to lean towards using the East 4th Street. Thank you.
Danielle?
So, on Avenue C, there's a bus that turns from 14th Street onto Avenue C. And something that has worked, and I see this a lot, is they just put the sign back, the stop where the other cars push it back, where cars stop at a certain spot on A, allowing the bus to always just be able to turn. Just giving back, just having the car stop sooner, and always keeping that little piece right there. Instead of taking away parking, instead of taking away everything, just put a new paint sign, make the car stop a little back, allowing that extra space for the buses to turn.
Danielle, by that,
Stop bar.
are you talking about the stop bar, Danielle, or are you talking about parked cars?
No parked cars, like in the street, so instead of
stop sign, the stoplight, yeah.
Yeah, instead of being all at the tip, we just push it back a little bit and have cars stop further back. And then it gives up that little space in the front for the tip of the bus to turn.
Yeah, Susan.
I think if they do decide to use it, I don't see why you wouldn't at least daylight a few cars on both corners. I also want to say, I think it's rather naive to say it's the only time it ever happened. The only reason MTA knew it happened that time is because I sent them a photo. You don't know when it happens. The bus driver certainly didn't report it. The other thing, I think saying you can't do something because of a sign is just not an effective reason, because anyone can change a sign. But if you do use it, I think you should be at least daylighting. And there should not be parking, key food parking in the morning for loading and unloading on Avenue A right at that corner, because that does happen.
By the dentist corner?
Across the street from Key Food on Avenue
Yeah,
A.
you're right. That it
They,
really.
they park, there is, like I say, talk about planning, there is no planning, and I'm not gonna trust something because planners say so. They're the same ones that plan the loading docks in Essex Crossing. So there is no plan for all the Key Food loading and unloading. So they use wherever they can. But if you're gonna have a bus there, you've got to make sure that they are not using that corner.
We could put one of those things that we put for the bikes.
Well, or they can put signage and enforce it.
That too.
Okay, committee. There's a variety of things here. I mean, there are things that could improve the 4th Street approach, which would require, we could ask for those. I'm just trying to think of alternatives here for a motion that we could pass. We could ask them to, like in addition or alternatively, to look at a U-turn on Houston Street at Avenue A, out of the left turn bay there. I suppose we could ask them not to do this at all. Are there other alternatives that we should be entertaining right now? I'm just, from what I'm hearing,
Ask them to go back to the union and see what the union's position is on.
that would be part of the U-turn, part of trying to get a U-turn route.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would.
What about the paint sign for temporary?
Well,
You're
that
just
would be
pushing back
part
the
of
car.
that would be part of improving the 4th Street route.
And that would still need permission from DOT to move that.
There would have to be a request to DOT, yes, to look at that and get that to happen.
Okay.
I also think that there ought maybe be a truck loading, unloading that's dedicated right there at the grocery store at Key Food in 4th Street. Is there not one, Susan?
If there is one, it's not adequate because they park on 4th Street east of Avenue A and all 4 corners on Avenue A in the mornings when they're all there at once. Actually, on 4th Street on both sides.
Right. So if it's multiple trucks, it's just not, that's not actually tractable. Well, okay.
Yeah, it would be nice to have dedicated parking, but they don't have any place.
Well, if there were more than one truck at a time, the dedicated probably won't handle more than one, certainly not more than
Yeah,
2.
there's often at least 4, because they all come at the same time, and then there's nothing all the rest of the day.
All right. I need to hear someone propose something, committee.
I'd
Josh.
like to make.
Josh?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think
Richard, can you figure out how to, sorry, Josh, if you can figure out how to use your raise hand function, Richard, it's down under.
I have
You're on
to
the
figure out how
laptop.
to do it without. Sorry, I apologize.
Under
David.
reactions, it's just like it's impossible for me actually to.
Yes,
manage
I
it.
understand.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Josh.
I think the best, after hearing the presentation, I think the best use of our voice is to support this layover with the caveats that we mentioned, to suggest the daylighting at that corner and to encourage higher enforcement at the corner of Avenue A. How to attach teeth to that, I don't know, but it seems like a flat out denial of this. It will only lead to a worse plan. If the buses have to turn somewhere else, then they'll end up just driving more. And the issues that we heard from the community were regarding the safety, which I don't really buy. Buses are a lot less dangerous than the equivalent number of cars, but reducing bus travel time, it's not just money for the MTA, it's just buses driving around aimlessly without picking up or dropping off passengers, this seems like a way, speaking as a layperson, which we all are, this seems like the best way to reduce that layover time. But yes, obviously it's an imperfect plan. And I think that we could make those suggestions that we've been discussing along with our approval.
I second that motion.
There was a motion somewhere in there. Let me, if I'd make a motion to pass such a, to support the layover with those caveats.
Richard,
I will oppose the motion. And if the motion gets defeated, I will propose an alternate motion, which would involve the U-turn of the buses onto through the Avenue A turn.
all right, so we're going to actually, Lee,
I have a question for Richard. Would he support a motion if the U-turn is not feasible, then to use East 4th Street perhaps with daylighting and modifying the intersection slightly at Avenue A and 4th Street as a secondary?
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure at this point, Lee.
Okay, thank you.
okay, Josh, can you screen share? There was a motion from last month that we could start with because it stated the facts of things and that'll get us past that.
Absolutely. Let me pull it up. I have it pulled up here.
Before we go too far with that, while you're bringing that up, can I just ask the committee for a straw poll of this so that we don't spend a long time on something that ultimately would not pass? So if you are generally in favor of doing this type of approval, raise your Zoom hand if you could. I think we're all here, the ability to do Zoom. That's only 2 of the committee would be willing to support this. And which of the committee would be, well, sorry, let me say it's 3. So how many of the remaining would oppose this? Richard? And Lee? Kaniel, have you raised your hand?
I'm looking for the button, sorry.
Okay, so you would also oppose it. And I think that we're only 6 here tonight, correct? Is there a 7th? I don't think so.
David Louis, isn't he here?
Oh, David Louis, you're there. David Louis, are you here?
I'm here.
Would you support this motion or would you oppose it?
I would be in support of it.
Okay, so let's go forward then, Josh, if you can screen share your draft.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, I have the draft, I have the resolution that was passed at full board in June. I also have a draft written from the office with a lot more details in
That might be better.
Well, no, I'm going to say the one I wrote was an opposing one, so I think
that's why I asked.
Let's
I
look at,
would use the original one.
I was thinking of the facts of the matter, which is probably the better draft, Josh.
Sure, I just copy and paste that out of the minutes. Let me share that now. It's not formatted nice, but we'll work it out.
Are you good?
You guys can see that, right?
Once I make the gallery smaller, I can see it. Probably the most visually impaired of the committee. Whereas they proposed it, whereas,
and
okay. All right, so we should probably add whereas describing the improvements that we would like to see. I'm not sure how much of that second whereas should remain. I mean, it's background of the reason why we want to ask for. Well, actually, I would be in favor of asking for daylighting at the corner of Avenue A, Avenue A. the
First
corner of
Avenue.
First Avenue, because if they're turning off of First, taking a right, because of this, we would add, I would like to ask. Okay, Susan, this is actually a request to DOT.
Stephen Greener, Indian hairdresser.
We typically don't send one motion to multiple agencies because it doesn't really work that well. Do you think, Susan, that
Yeah.
we're doing?
Well, they are, in this case, they are absolutely working together. So what I would word it saying under the condition that there is DOT daylights the corner.
In the resolved, okay, but
Yeah,
okay.
they are,
Both.
somebody needs to mute.
Yeah.
They are,
that phone
this is
muted.
not usual because they are completely working together on this.
Yeah, I understand now. Okay. All right. So the second whereas,
Yeah.
If I may, maybe we include some of this background as a, as a justification for the daylighting, but I don't think our conclusion that I highlighted here, it doesn't
Right.
appear to be accurate.
I believe so. And let's cut that and add another whereas if people don't object to this. I'm just going to sort of cut through the approval process. If someone objects to a change, I'll try to pause at each change to see if there's objection. If you object, then we'll have some debate on it and perhaps a vote. And a vote. But this is as opposed to like stopping and doing amendments continually for something that we've already agreed is the approach we want to take. Okay, so whereas I think we need to state here that that DOT has analyzed the turn radius, off of First onto 4th Street, and deemed it adequate. However, CB3, evidently, occasionally more space is needed. I don't know how to say it, Josh, but we would like to have
I'll just type everything and we'll figure it out.
Okay. However, it's evident that additional space would be helpful. To complete the turn safely. And so CB3 would like DOT to look at daylighting that corner by removing, the way the thing is set up, it would really be on 4th Street, a space or two by removing, because there's a bike lane there and it's already, well, if there is parking on the Avenue A, just say 4th Street and or Avenue A. Or
So
removing.
can I ask you, David, why you're writing to consider
Well,
instead of to
as we
date?
decided, we threw it out there and then polish up the language afterwards.
Well, I'm talking about.
I know, so let's polish it up. But do we
Okay.
have the?
And just to clarify, David, are we talking about both sides, the First Avenue side and?
Well, this was the turn off of First Avenue, which is
Right.
what the second whereas is about.
It's
So
the
it's on to
northeast corner,
4th Street and or First Avenue.
but it's the northeast corner there.
Okay. It's the southeast corner.
No, it's the north.
Turning off of First Avenue.
That's where he got stuck. It was at the northeast corner because of the cars there.
Just out of curiosity,
Yeah, they're turning off of northbound First Avenue, but I don't know where you'd be best to return to remove the spaces actually.
I think we could say the intersection and.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I am new to this discussion about daylighting. And apparently the committee has considered this before. But during this whole conversation this evening, all of the conversation about daylighting seemed to be focused on Avenue Way and 4th Street.
Well, we'll
on
talk
turn
about that
lane.
too, but at First Avenue is where the bus actually got stuck making the turn.
Okay, but the
We'll also
MTA,
do Avenue A next.
the MTA is saying that there is no problem with that. So why would we remove parking spaces that are 99% used by residents of Village View when the MTA says that that turn is okay? I would like to ask that that not be considered on the
Okay.
northeast corner in 4th Street and First Avenue. If you're going to proceed down to Avenue A, that's something else.
Okay, other committee members, opinions, or we want to, before we vote on that? Michelle?
Yeah, that was me that mentioned the daylighting on that corner because that's where, sorry, the corner of 1st and 4th, because that's where the bus got stuck and where the MTA specifically said that they had done the study, but I described that often those studies are done under precise and ideal conditions and that the daylighting is a fallback to give more space. And Susan also suggested that we ask for that as part of it. So I don't think that there's a right for people to park their cars on the street and, you know, incessantly. I think people have a right to get places on a bus though. So I think that we should prioritize the bus's ability to move around. Thanks.
Other committee members want to speak?
I also agree with Richard that, you know, we are in a residential area and parking is still essential to residents. Not everyone uses MTA the same way not everyone drives. We have to consider both sides.
Lee?
And yes, people are allowed to park on the street. So to make a statement like that, while people are allowed to park on the street, if the MTA originally said that they don't need daylighting over there, and we're just throwing it out there because, well, we don't want parking, and so this is just another way of let's get rid of some parking spots. That's not really our role.
Michelle?
I didn't say that you can't. I said that people do not have a right to park on the street because it's one person. It's a much smaller vehicle that brings very many fewer people and is, I think everyone knows how I feel about cars. What I said is that people have more of a right to be able to get places quickly on an MTA public transportation bus. It's sort of funny that like safety for some people is considered, but you know, we're going to prioritize parking for like 3 people. I don't really understand that. And yeah, thanks.
Susan?
Yeah, I don't have any issues with parking at all, but we have seen a problem on this specific corner. And so I think, you know, just a question of maybe 2 cars. I don't know how much they would have to do. We have done daylight. We've done a lot of daylighting at one time on Avenue B. It's not new to this board. You know, I think for safety and just to make sure that the turn where we've seen difficulty, even if you say you can do it, we've certainly seen difficulty just to make it easier.
Can I get a comment from the MTA on that?
Well, Phil has your hand up.
Yeah, as far as the daylighting, it doesn't have to be 24/7. Just keep that in mind. You could put a restricted time on
There
there.
you go. Just in the morning.
Exactly.
But
That's
if
a good
there's a car,
compromise.
It makes a complicated sign.
it does. And if somebody parks there, there's no guarantee that they'll be out of there by the time that they need to be. So either we do it, you know, we do it fully or we don't.
Because then they'll get ticketed because we give out tickets as well.
Yeah, we
There's
do.
no guarantee that no one will park there anyway if it's an empty spot. We can't keep it empty in the city.
We have restrictions on time all over.
Right.
David, I can't raise my hand while I'm screen sharing, but I went to our district needs, which is obviously our next agenda item, just as a reminder, that 92% of workers in the district do not use a car to commute to work. I mean, if it's 2 parking spots versus 15 minutes of a bus route, it's a no-brainer.
But there are also other people other than workers, whether they're going to hospitals or doctor's appointments or taking their children to school.
I understand, but if you would to compare the value of the 2 parking spots versus the number of minutes saved by the number of commuters on the bus, I think by number of residents, by community members served, I don't think it's close.
Well, we're getting into the weeds here. Your proposal was to daylight a couple of spots, and I would suggest that you guys continue with putting that in.
Well, let's stop and ask these 2 paragraphs. If we could highlight the 2 paragraphs, actually, let's delete the word consider. Not consider daylighting, but it is actually there. It would be to daylight that corner toward the end, 2 below your mouse. So go ahead and delete the word consider and change it to daylight. And if you could highlight both of those paragraphs, I'm going to just ask the committee to vote up or down on whether to include those and the one above, because they kind of go together. So we either include this or we don't. So committee, raise your hand if I'm going to vote last, by the way. If raise your hand if you want to keep these paragraphs in. If you do want to ask for daylighting, I see Josh, that's 2. And who wants to remove those 2 paragraphs? Richard, I see Richard's hand. If other people are, Richard is the last one because I cannot see everyone.
I'm sorry, my raised hand's not working, but I would have raised hand in the first half of that.
You would have raised to approve, so it would have been 3 to approve, and then Richard, and I didn't see a Kenyelle.
I'm abstain.
Okay. So we're keeping it in then. Okay. Now go back to. Sorry, I'm trying to manage these windows. Okay. Yeah, I will say, y'all, that having it in there doesn't, DOT is going to look at it, and if they already feel that the turning radius is good enough, they may decide not to, but this is to ask them to do that. We'll add something similar in the therefore. Now let's look at what we want to ask about at the corner of Avenue A, 4th Street and Avenue A, if they're taking this route. And what the problems that we discussed there were, well, articulated bus is just long, and so it blocks everything. If it gets blocked, it really is a problem. Avenue A is much narrower than First Avenue, and it's a two-way street. So at Avenue A, the same time that the buses would be doing this to stage for the morning rush, or when the Key Food gets its deliveries. And what do we want to ask for there?
So I think just enforcement would do it because it's actually a bus lane, but the trucks park in the bus lane. So I think we need an enforcement of keeping the bus lane clear.
From the Key Food delivery trucks.
Yeah, but we're talking about the southbound lane at that turn, southbound lane on Avenue A at that turn.
Mm-hmm. That's not a bus stop anymore, right? That's
no, the bus stop is on between Fifth and Sixth.
right.
So it's just enforcement.
All right. So let's put a whereas in here that says whereas the turn off of 4th Street onto Avenue A is at a Avenue A is one lane at that point with a bus lane. So it's a turn onto one southbound lane of Avenue A, adjacent to the bus. They don't call it an express lane, dedicated bus lane.
Well, they turn where they can turn, you know, they
I understand, but I'm describing the street and saying that what happens there is, okay, at that intersection, there's a, I mean, I'm conflicted here because asking for enforcement against the trucks that are delivering food to my grocery store. The hours where the staging is going to happen in the morning hours where the buses will be laying over are the same hours where there are deliveries to the key food at that corner.
Well, you're just asking them to use all four corners.
I know.
So you're just asking for one corner to be enforced.
Yeah, so we would, yeah, so we're asking for. And this isn't DOT now, this is going to basically be NYPD.
So you would ask them to work with NYPD to ensure enforcement of that corner.
David, I have my hand up about this actually.
Susan, I mean, Michelle, go ahead.
I was gonna ask Susan, do you think that there's utility in putting in a request for automated enforcement for the bus lane generally there? Because that's, I think, I mean, there's just no way that PD is gonna be there at all times enforcing that corner.
Well, they wouldn't need to be there all times. If they went by once in the morning, it would work. You know, it's a joke, you know, DOT put in the bus lane because they're supposed to be putting in bus lanes. And, you know, there's parking there all the time. As you know, there was a booted car in the bus lane for 2 weeks. You know, it's not, I don't know what to say about it. You know, it's
Well,
kind of,
well, that's why I'm asking if there's utility in asking for
I don't
automated
think-
enforcement, like like the buses have the cameras. I think wouldn't that, I mean, if people were getting tickets from being there, that would probably help with and it wouldn't require any additional.
you can
resources.
ask it. I don't think they'll do it, but yes. you
Okay.
can.
So I guess Josh, and also, automated enforcement. Just another bullet. And then my second question was, we had mentioned also maybe asking for additional loading zones over there so that there isn't conflict.
There's no place. There isn't any place.
There isn't what? There isn't any place?
There isn't any place extra. I think they have a loading zone on 4th Street east of Avenue A, but there's too many trucks there. They just, you know, it's too late to start planning. We have the same thing on Avenue A in Houston at Union Market. There is just no place.
So let's ask, well, first the morning hours or the buses, if we add that to the whereas above, you've already got a sentence down there about that.
Phil has his hand up.
Bottom.
I don't know if he wants to contribute.
Phil, do you? Let's say that we want them to look at measures to prevent, let's say that there are conflicts. There are conflicts with parks illegally using, parking, vehicles that are parking or standing in the moving lanes or the bus lane at that intersection that cause that they conflict with this bus motion, with this bus movement. And we asked DOT or NYPD to well, we want them to take measures. We don't need to specify what they are.
Well, I would, they're not going to do anything if you don't
Such as?
specify.
They're probably not going to.
Such as current enforcement and while implementing automated enforcement.
Okay. And then,
You want that into this, the whereas about Avenue A here?
yeah,
Okay.
and then the idea of the stop bar. So the moving of the stop bar in the MTA asked for is to it's the same situation. It's to deal with the same situation. So as to have cars. These are cars who are waiting at the stoplight. We also ask that the stop bar for the northbound traffic on Avenue A at the 4th Street stoplight be moved further south to create additional turning space for the turning motion.
I think that should make a big difference.
And that's the thing that you were mentioning, Danielle. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So are there other measures that we had wanted to make this to flow better? Stop moving to the south. Right.
I think, and I apologize, I just can't raise my hand while I'm sharing. But I think that we should have a whereas about the idea that this is the best available, you know, because we obviously we're making some points against this, but after hearing the presentation, I think we should address, you know, there are other, and they appear to be.
Can you draft that for us right now?
I don't know if there's value in that as a whereas.
Well, there probably is if it's a brief one or two.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas that talked about the M15 bus service does the Staten Island. I really don't care about. I mean, personally, if you're going to put those buses in our area, you can bring back a better crosstown bus service downtown before you can do that. But I understand it's just a bundle. The M15 is a pretty important route for everyone in the city.
I mean, maybe I can ask, I don't know, Luke or Buckley. What would you say you explored? I mean, alternate options and found that. How would you describe that process? I don't know if I can. I know we're in committee now, David, but I'm not.
No, I understand. Well, we need to have a sentence or two. That's all, so that the full board understands that it was looked at by the committee, because this is going to get talked about at full board, and it's just helpful if the committee.
I suggest that we reviewed alternatives.
Is this accurate?
Whereas they reviewed alternative.
Where's the MTA reviewed alternative? Where's the MTA reviewed alternative?
We reviewed alternative layover locations as well as access to the proposed location.
I'm sorry, Buckley, say that again, please.
So we looked at two things. We looked at is there another layover location that makes sense, and that does not. And we also looked at other ways of getting to this location, and those are not optimal.
Understood.
And actually not feasible.
Does this
So how
one
about
sentence
this, Josh?
Go ahead, David.
They reviewed alternate layover locations and routes to get buses to this location. So they reviewed alternate, alternate, and maybe let's just repeat the word alternate again, and alternate routes to get buses to this location.
And they were deemed infeasible.
I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's how they presented it. I mean, they did, and I mean, in my I'm swayed most by the M15. This is necessary for the M15 route. I mean, that's my opinion. And I kind of, I mean, that's what we would be asking the board to sign on, that opinion. So something along those lines. Okay. Now, let's change that there. Go ahead and put the whereas above like you're doing.
I'm sorry, say again.
If drop the therefore at the bottom and let's clean, let's correct that to what we intend. So I didn't hear objections to the whereas that we just added. Okay. Add a therefore now. Let's get this going. We're running quite late. Therefore, be it resolved, CB3 Manhattan approves of the proposed MTA bus loader, a copy and paste from above. And other on that location, as well as there you go. We didn't mention I don't think we need to at this point. It's getting late, but we have not mentioned the taxi zone, or should we memorialize it? We probably should actually. Serve as a layover from that. Put a period in front of the up in the first whereas. Instead of a comma and, it'll be period and then a second sentence in front of the, yeah. The taxi stand currently at that location would be moved to the north side, the north curb of the same block, period. Or comma, either one. That's good. Now at the bottom, we also need to, in the therefore, we need to say, just briefly reiterate the things that we want to facilitate successful bus movement along the route from First Avenue across 4th Street to Avenue A. CB3 is asking, then we just need to state for MIPD and DOT to daylight Avenue A and 4th Street and modify and move the stop bar for northbound Avenue A. And what was the thing about enforcement? Things that we've had more detail in the whereases. And then I think we are done. Take measures, take enforcement measures to prevent.
Is that Phil's talking?
Somebody's got the baseball game on.
Yes, someone is to prevent I don't know, inappropriate, illegal, one of the two words, parking and stopping on at the intersection of 4th and A. Probably it's standing as opposed to stopping, but yeah. All right, committee, is there anything else we need to do to this? I'm not seeing any hands. I think we'll go to a vote on it then. Last chance. Just unmute if I have not been able to discern your hand, and these tiny little postage stamp windows are your faces. Okay.
If I can just clarify something, I think you meant to daylight the intersection of 1st and 4th, not Avenue A and 4th.
We did.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Okay, committee, we ready to vote? We take a roll call vote on this.
Great. I'm gonna stop sharing. And go to here. David, you want to go last?
Please.
Sure. Joshua Waterman, yes. Wendy Lee didn't show up, did she? No.
She's out today.
Lee Berman.
No.
Tariq Darrell absent. Kenyal Hernandez.
Yes.
Okay, Michelle Cooper Smith.
Yes.
David Louie.
Yes.
Richard Robiak.
No.
Okay, and David Crane.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Motion passes.
All right, now Academy Bus. I believe they actually were here at the meeting where we previously talked about it, but we weren't able to connect. Academy Bus is asking for two different bus stop applications. There's a bus use permit for curbside use of a bus that there's a process that the city has for this. The community board gets to weigh in, and I'll just ask if they are here to present their request.
Yes, they are.
Academy Bus.
I see Mr. Luna and Mr. Conrad.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Yes, we are. Thank you. I'm sorry I was muted. Good evening, Chairman Crane, Susan, and others on the community board, and thank you for your participation and efforts. We're here this evening again to we apologize for the misconnect technical last week for two stops regarding the current NYU shuttle bus operation, which we've operated for many years. We're also joined with Valentine Goldstein here from NYU. I'm going to turn this over immediately to Mr. Tony Luna, who is our Director of Operations for this service. Tony, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Okay, fantastic. Once again, do apologize for the last time. I know that we were scheduled to discuss this on the last meeting. Obviously, with the situation with my laptop, I guess it couldn't happen. So anyway, my name is Tony Luna. I'm one of the managers and administrators for this service that we're providing for NYU, and we're asking the Department of Transportation and the committee board to see if you could approve for two bus stops that are on the agenda right now for approval. The first one on the agenda would be, I believe it's 114 on 3rd Avenue, which is 114 on 3rd Avenue, which is between 14th and 13th Street, heading southbound. Stop is facing south, and it is, and the bus will be stopping at an MTA bus stop. It is currently an MTA bus stop right now, and so we would also like to have the NYU buses stop there. For that particular stop, we're going to be running services only Monday through Thursday. I believe this information you already have that I sent prior, and so the service will also run between 8 a.m. to about 10 p.m. It's about 28 trips that we want to stop there. The buses are going to stop there for about a minute. This is not going to be any kind of layover. It's there to drop off and pick up and then continue on to the next stop. And so this particular stop is only from Monday to Thursday, as I indicated. And then the second bus stop that we also want to apply is going to be on 14th Street between 3rd Avenue and 2nd Avenue, closer to the 3rd Avenue intersection, which is also an MTA bus stop, or currently an MTA bus stop, that we also would like to have our NYU buses stop there. And that particular service will be running Monday through Sunday. just to give you just a quick recap of what the services are for each day. We broke it up as Monday to Thursday. We're running the service between about 7 a.m. to about 11:30 p.m., which would consist about 31 trips. On Friday schedule, just Fridays, we will be running between 7 a.m. to about 11:30, which will consist of 26 trips. And then on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we're running between 10 a.m. to about 11:30 p.m. and that will consist of about 16 trips. Once again, this is not a layover stop. This is a stop that we would proceed and pick up and drop off, and then continue to the next stop. So to the board and of course to the Department of Transportation, we're asking at this time to get approval for these two stops based on the times and schedules that we provided to you.
Okay, so committee, or actually, are there people from the public want to comment? I would like to go straight into committee if not. All right, committee, debate. Who wants to speak? Lee?
Or I apologize if I missed this. So what are the routes? Where are you picking up? Where are these kids going? What's the beginning of the route? Where are they stopping throughout the city? Where's it ending up?
Okay, so so let's start with the first bus stop, which is the one on 3rd Avenue and 14th Street between 14th and 3rd. So that particular route, as I mentioned, is Monday to Thursday. So all the routes that I've mentioned, at least for these two stops, originate at 715 Broadway at their NYU location. And it does a certain route turn all the way until it gets to that stop. So I can sort of give you an idea. The stop before approaching the stop that we're requesting, it would stop at 3rd Avenue and 17th Street. So when it stops there and picks up, it would then proceed to the 14th Street stop that we're asking on 3rd Avenue. And then from there, it will continue on and stop at 11th Street and 3rd Avenue. And then it will then originate at 715 Broadway, which will be between Waverly and Washington Place. So in that particular bus stop, that service will be Monday to Thursday. The other stop, which is on 14th Street and between 3rd and 2nd, which closest to 3rd, the stop again, once again, will originate at 715. We'll do a turnaround. And so just to give you an idea where the stop is coming from before, we would then stop at 14th and Irving Place, and then we'll stop at 14th and 3rd. And then the next stop from there will continue to 1st Avenue and 17th Street. From that point forward, it will just continue uptown until we get to the medical center and then turn back around. So an idea would be for that stop will be 7 days. And that's more or less where the routes will be originating and finishing.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, committee? Susan, and then Josh and Michelle. Susan.
I was just curious about the where they're coming to and from on Sundays and Saturdays.
Specifically in to that question, are you referring to the actual route or?
Well, I assume it's generally to get kids to classes and back, but that wouldn't be for that on Saturday and Sunday. So why is there a route on Saturday and Sunday?
Well, they do have some classes that do operate those days, but a lot of times the students will need to study. There's a lot of offices that are open, the library is open. So NYU has their locations open for that reason. So as there'll be less classes there, this is just an opportunity for students to get to campus. There might be different types of events that might be taking place with NYU. So, as the NYU is part of this community, going back and forth, besides they also have other events and other things that they need to do. So part of that process and part of that community, they would need to, get to these locations. So just like how we would normally do during the weekdays when the school session is happening, they will also need to get to the campuses for other events. So that's why they offer the 7 days a week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions you might have?
David, you're muted, but I think you said my name. Can you just clarify who's able to use the buses, if that's just the NYU students or faculty or who exactly?
I can take this one, Tony. Good evening. My name is Valentine Goldstein. I'm with NYU Community Engagement. And our shuttle buses are open to the entire university community. So it serves students, but it also serves faculty, administrators, and staff. And as Tony mentioned, students and other members of the community can use it to get to courses and classes, but it can also be used to transport individuals to different facilities, all the way from our medical center down to our campus in downtown Brooklyn.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Thanks, David. I just have a comment. I want to remind, I know we have some newer committee members that we had a similar application from the same operator from NYU come before us a couple of months ago. I don't know, time's flat circle at some point before you all joined, and we rejected that application because we felt it was duplicative and actually potentially cannibalizing from MTA routes. And we have this is in our district needs, that we have problems with ridership on our routes. And so the MTA subsequently reduces. It's a vicious cycle. And so we are, our aim is to have people use MTA buses, not private buses that are only for NYU students, faculty, et cetera, especially since they seem, a lot of them mimic MTA routes. So I'm just gonna say, I'm going to vote against this for the same exact reason that I voted against it and the committee voted against it previously.
Lee?
As Michelle mentioned, when we had this vote some time ago, I also voted against it. However, tonight I will vote for it. When the MTA shows that they can safeguard all of the riders on buses and trains, and crime is reduced, that's something else. But right now, I'm in.
Committee, all right, guys. As the parliamentarian of the board, you know that I like do things by the rules. So I'm not going to suggest emotion. I'm not going to suggest emotion. I'm just not. Committee? I mean, we need emotion of what, to be for or against. Richard?
Motion to deny the request.
Okay. Josh, I think that we may have a draft to that effect.
Yeah, I took a similar resolution that we passed a number of months ago before I was on the board. Do we want to do a straw poll before I bring up such a negative I don't know procedure here?
Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Just to see, because as we did before, to make sure that we're not going to go down a rabbit hole for something that won't pass.
Sure.
So committee, raise your hand if you would be for opposing this. So you would vote for a motion to ask that it not be granted. That's 2, I see.
I believe Richard did make the motion, so I believe he'd be counted in that as well.
David, Louis, Kenyelle, okay, it'll pass. So go ahead and bring it up.
Yep. I have so many windows open now. How does Wendy do it? Okay. This is what I put together based on a previous resolution that this committee passed. I don't know if you want to read it, David, or what.
Right. So I'm gonna go ahead and read it aloud. I don't know how many people are actually on the meeting. It's not going to take that long. Whereas NYU has an existing transportation service with shuttle routes through the community District 3 and beyond, connecting NYU facilities and residences. Academy Bus LLC, who provides that service to NYU, have applied for a DOT permit for a curbside loading and unloading permit at 3rd Avenue between 14th and 13th Streets. We would presumably we're just going to do the same motion for the other as well in a bit. And whereas by providing privately contracted transportation services for NYU students, faculties, and employees, NYU is diverting demand away from available public transportation options, including duplicating portions of MTA provided subways and bus routes, and the extensive city bike system. Specifically, the location of the proposed bus stop is within 1/5 of a mile of 8 subway lines, L, N, Q, R, W, 4, 5, 6, and numerous local and express bus lines. And whereas it would be beneficial to the community if that NYU demand for transit showed up in the ridership counts conducted regularly by MTA and YCT. Those ridership numbers determine funding and scheduling adjustments in public transportation services provided by the MTA and YCT. By offering a redundant private alternate to public city buses, true transit ridership numbers are misrepresented due to a dilution of the ridership pool. And therefore be it resolved, CB3 recommends that DOT does not approve this permit to Academy Express LLC for curbside loading and unloading at that location. Because the entirety of the private transportation system operated by Academy Bus for NYU is unnecessary and harmful to Community District 3.
And then the following motion is identical with the other, I'm sorry, yeah, with the other address.
Is that what you had in mind, Richard? Okay. Is there more discussion?
Philosophically, I support Lee, but I also oppose NYU. So I'm sort of stuck with this one.
All right, so is there a discussion committee? Yeah, I'll say that the NYU is I went there. I mean, you know, just disclosure, I have my graduate degree is from NYU. And after NYU started doing this with their privately provided bus route, it did start taking away demand from the M8 bus, which we used to take regularly. I mean, I wasn't offered the service when I was an NYU student. I bussed across town on the transit buses. NYU is becoming, NYU students are a larger and larger proportion of the population in that district. What's happening is like you really, NYU, you are dividing the ridership into what you're providing privately and what the public can get. And the MTA now has cut service on the M8 so that it happens twice an hour in the midday hours. Like I think the most frequent is every 10 minutes during rush hour. And that's only on the only on weekdays that it's that frequent. It's a problem for us. You know, I don't think you're ever going to get a different result out of this committee. Please stop doing it. But this is the best motion that I think that we can send to the New York City, to the DOT committee. I don't think we can make this stronger, for instance, to maximize the likelihood of them not getting that permit. I think they're going to get it. Do we want to go to a vote right away? All right, let's do that.
Okay. David, I will put you last. Joshua Waterman, yes. Wendy Lee is not here. Lee Berman.
No.
Okay, Tariq Darrell is not here. Kenyel Hernandez.
Yes.
Michelle Cooper Smith.
Yes.
David Louie.
Yes.
Richard Robiak.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that was yes?
Yes.
Thank you, Richard. And David Crane.
All right, committee, Susan, your hands up. Oh, you're muted.
I want to wait till the vote is over.
It's over.
David, I'm sorry, I just didn't catch your vote.
Oh, was I muted? My vote's yes.
Great. Motion passes.
Okay, yeah, I raised my hand because I would like to ask Valentine, you know, this As you mentioned, NYU is part of the community. There have been many years in the past where there was closer engagement. And I would like to ask if you could go back to NYU and discuss this and engage and discuss this with us, you know, to at least try and find common ground or acknowledge the situation.
Absolutely. I think, you know, we've gone to many different community boards to have this similar conversation, and we're really trying to engage communities around finding the best and safest spots. If there are concerns around, you know, safety or other transportation operations that are happening at that location, then we're happy to have that conversation to find the most optimal spots within the community. These are already operating systems. We're not proposing a new shuttle bus service, and many of the stops that we're presenting at various community boards are already in operation. So we're really trying to have conversations to find the best, most optimal and safest spots to operate these shuttle buses. So those are the conversations that we're very happy to have. And I can definitely take, you know, any questions or concerns back to the university and have those conversations in return as well.
I would ask you, I don't want to delay it at this meeting. I would like to ask you to take back the concerns, not about which spots, but about our concerns about having the private bus service that is unnecessary and taking away from public bus. If you could, you know, if we could have that discussion with NYU, you know, at a later time.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to note that not all of our students, many of our students, most of our students, and most of our administrators, faculty, and staff are utilizing public transportation. It's not an either or. It's a combination, or pardon me, it's a combination of multiple systems. And I think someone mentioned issues around safety on public transportation. And that's something that we're seeing right now. We had an incident at our Brooklyn campus this past week, and our students, I think, you know, feel much safer when they have this option. But certainly many of the people that utilize or that are on campus are using a range of transportation options, including public transportation.
Thank you.
Lee?
David, I apologize. I should have asked this earlier. What type of buses are these? Are these zero emission vehicles? Are these electric vehicles, or what kind of emissions are they?
Tony, we're
I think
using.
Tony or Patrick.
Yeah, we're not using. Tony, you want to give them the fleet? I'm sorry, it's diesel and gas, right?
They're diesel and gas right now, but we do operate 3 buses that are hybrids that are electric and gas. So there is a mixture, and obviously what the future will look. Obviously, that's something that NYU is looking into, but at this time, that's where we're running service.
And we as an industry are working towards not only zero emissions, but electric vehicles, et cetera, in different places as the vehicles become available.
Yep, and I know that's also something that our sustainability department at the university is looking into. I don't have an exact timeline on, you know, when that could happen, but it's certainly a priority to align all of our operations and make sure that everything is as sustainable as possible.
I would certainly hope that with consideration of being better neighbors, you guys would consider speeding up that timeline.
Yep, all of those conversations are currently ongoing.
We need to move 2 hours. We're into this. We need to move on now to the district needs and the budget expense and capital expense priorities. So we've been working on this for months.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so good night. Thank you for your time and service. Thank you.
So committee, we back in June and July, we had input into the district needs statement, and the final draft is out. We need to vote on that tonight. It is actually too late to add to it. You know, we'll have some discussion if we'd like, but we needed to have things in so that could be researched and finalized for that. We're also going to then bring up the budget priorities. We have last year's. Do people need more information about or explanation about what the budget process is that we're participating in? And Yale's been around long enough to have seen us go through that. David, do you? All right. Hmm.
You want me to give 2 sentences?
Thank you, Susan. If you would do that, I was just gonna go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll just talk about the priorities, not the needs. The budget priorities are for next fiscal year, which will start next July, so it's not for the current budget. These priorities are asking agencies to spend money, how we want them to spend money in our community. The goal of this is to bring money into the community. So we may have a program that we care a lot about, but if it's well-funded, we wouldn't make that a high priority because that money is already in the community. We would take a priority or a program or other expense such as salaries, that kind of thing, that is in danger of not having enough funding. So we want to make sure everything that's important to us is well-funded. These have all been researched. The community boards met with agencies for 3 days in September. So we had on the agenda for those agencies, the different programs and different issues that we have been talking about all year. I sent out the priorities ahead of time. Also on our website is all the agendas that we had with the agencies and their answers. So I'm hoping there were a few people read those. And from those, actually, I have 2 additional suggestions for the budget that were from those consultations. The whole board gets 25 expense priorities. So it's important to rank them because the bottom ones will likely be kicked off when we hit the line at 25. And we have both expense, which are salaries and programs, and we have capital, which are vehicles, bike lanes, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Susan.
We probably should start with the budget, with the district needs and finalize that.
We can vote
right.
on both at the same time if you want, as we've done before.
So were there sections of the district needs that someone wanted to point out something about?
Can we not go through the whole thing?
Let's not go through it. If people
not
did
do
it
this.
and had something that they wanted to bring up. I mean, we can bring it up if someone has, hey, like paragraph such and such.
Yes, but
so I'm going to take that as no, that there's people don't see things that we should improve. Okay. Then about the project priorities, let's go ahead and bring those up. So these are going to be last year's priorities. Often we
say on
use,
the back is on the back of this is the capital.
you're right. So let's bring up the expense priorities. Go ahead and do that, Josh. And so these are last year's without change, Susan? Is that the?
These are last year's, and I have put below each one the response from the agency about it.
Okay. So the response from the agency is, yeah, I mean, if they are saying, we should read those carefully. If we really start to drill into any of these things, let's read the agency response.
Well, I would like to also say that the time that they responded to those last January, there has been major changes since then. So I can also give some comment from the consultations.
Right. Right. So these were the order in which 4. There were only these 4. There's another page.
There were these 4, and this was the order.
Okay. Okay. The rat mitigation zone collection. This was a program that had, this is the program that they had started up, Susan, and that had gone.
This was, yeah, pre-COVID. We were one of 3 worst neighborhoods. We were in this program because we were one of the 3 worst neighborhoods in the city. At the time we wrote this last year, they had reduced collection because of COVID, reduced the program because of COVID. And they have now saying that they are fully back on track. And however, I would suggest that we keep this as a priority because we're in such bad condition. And we can see that the garbage collection is not anywhere near where it should be regardless of this program.
So the rat mitigation program is still ongoing.
It is ongoing, yes.
Okay. And so then the second one, increased sanitation pickups at NYCHA.
Right, this is still an issue because not all NYCHA developments have compactors. That's particularly makes it a problem. They're saying it's not a budget request, it's a service delivery. But I've been actually working with sanitation on this all year, and they do need more funding for more pickups.
Do you think they would provide a different response next year?
Possibly, it's a different administration.
Right. Yeah. So people, this is a thing that can typically happen. They'll go, this isn't a budget request. So, so we do kind of have to craft our requests so that they can say, yeah, we want that increased in the budget, or, to react to it. But when they say something like this, it's a sign that we did phrase it correctly, usually.
Yeah.
Okay. Like if we say we want a certain type of service, but they fund it through a department that isn't, they can't break it down to that level, is the kind of response you often get. Increased sanitation pickup for schools. What do you know about that, Susan?
It's, since they stopped the composting, it's really bad shape. These are constant complaints, and yes, they still need this, particularly because there's no composting programs.
Yeah, the composting program used to pick up a lot of the, leftover discarded food at the end of the day. Okay. And the litter basket service, golden oldie.
So they said they have fully restored all litter basket pickups. So I'd say that's up in the air if you want to. If you want to keep it, if you do want to keep it, I would put it last.
And what was their response last year? Funds uncertain.
Yeah.
What does that even mean as a response?
It means that, well, we're talking about in the future, we want this done in the future, and they're saying they don't know if they're going to have funds to do that.
And we're advocating for funds to be provided through the city budget.
Yes.
So I don't know what the response means, but.
Because we're asking for, it was reduced but when we wrote this, we're saying it was reduced. It was reduced during COVID.
Okay.
It has now been it is now back to pre-COVID pickup. So if you do keep it, we have to change the explanation. We would say we want, to ensure funding, but it is no longer reduced. They now have full basket pickup.
Okay.
You can say you want additional, pickups, particularly on weekends or something like that, but it is no longer reduced.
All right. So committee, those are the 4 that we had last year. Do we want to make any changes other than?
No. Do you want to look at the 2 at the bottom?
Oh, there were others?
I have 2 suggestions.
Okay. All right, I see. Civilian staff for NYPD unable to hire full head count.
So I brought this up, their problem with lack of staff, and I'd say people in the community do complain that they don't get enough service. And the problem with lack of staff is not funding, it's they can't hire people. So I actually brought this up at the meeting, would increase funding for civilian staff, free up police for police work, and they thought that was great. So that is one suggestion. And the other one is curbside composting. They're not even talking about restoring it for full borough in Manhattan. They're restoring it for Queens. And
Yeah.
I think curbside composting, I think should be pretty high on the list.
Susan, can you clarify for the point that I've highlighted here, would that come with an increase to NYPD budget or a suggested reallocation of?
We're saying that we're not, their budget is their budget. We can't increase it. We're talking about how the money is used.
Whose budget is fixed and can't be increased?
Any agency, their budgets are their budgets. We're telling them how we want money spent.
Within the agency. It's this, okay. I actually thought that this was to advocate for increasing funding on budget lines. It's the very first thing out of the gate for.
Well, we want increased funding for those lines. The city can increase funding. They're not going to increase funding to the police department because we say that.
Oh, the city's budget
This
is
is
not
this.
go down to this level, but of course the department budget does.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we say it is important to have civilians, when city council votes and the mayor vote on the budget, they're going to look at everything that needs to be covered. But it's not like we're saying, oh, the community board wants this, we're going to add this to the police budget.
All right, committee. What do we want to do? Do we, let's put all 6 of these in and rank them, and some may fall off the bottom when we get to the full board. Actually, this happens at the exec. What happens is if we submit 6, there may be 8 coming out of human services and 3 coming out of land use or whatever. In the end, there'll be more than 25, and they are separate lists. What will happen at exec is we'll take number 1 from one of those lists and make it 1 for the board overall. And we'll look at the remaining top of the list out of each committee and choose a number 2. We collate them so that the full board, the executive committee should not alter the order of these 6 items that we send up, but they obviously would not be the top 6 for the full board. Some will be pushed down and other committees' priorities will be inserted in between. Okay, so which order do we want to send them up? Oh, what I was saying was that if we send up 6, it's likely that the last 2 would actually be pushed down below number 25. It would not be in the final list. It just means that we really need to set our priorities. If we were upset that number 6 got bumped out instead of number 4, well, then we should have had number 6 higher than number 4 coming out of committee. That's all I'm saying. So, suggestions on the existing 4, do we believe those are in the right order? If so, we can insert the 2 new ones. Does anyone disagree with the order of numbers 1 through 4? All right, we'll take that.
Actually,
yes,
David, I think I have to make a disclosure here.
Okay.
FYI, I am a civilian staff member of the NYPD, so I'm not sure if this is a conflict, but just to make everybody aware, thank you.
So I think
conflict for purposes of voting, Lee, but you definitely can, and I believe should participate in all suggestions and debate.
No, absolutely, but for voting, and I'm also curious as to for ranking, whether or not, for discussion, yes, but for ranking, I'm not sure.
For ranking, I think you shouldn't vote. What was that, Susan? You agree?
I said ranking is part of the vote.
Right. So don't vote on those rankings, but if you wanted to suggest why and argue, you could suggest why and argue. That's not against the conflict of interest rulings.
So I'd really be interested to hear what you think, Lee.
Lee, are you trying to speak?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Now
I actually removed the civilian staff for NYPD from this. I don't know that it's within our purview, nor these other 5 items are much more tangible, much more doable, and I think or can be done much more quickly. So that's my comment.
So I'd like to comment on whether it's in our purview. It's 100% within our purview, and it was discussed at the budget consultation with the police budget people there and ONB.
We've used this language in the past, either in the district needs or in expense priorities. It's not a totally a new idea.
Correct. I didn't think of it myself. It was from stuff you and I remember from years ago, David.
I believe that it had been in our priorities at one point.
Yes.
But Lee, it does make sense to me that if I believe it should be additional funds, but if there were additional funding to police department that was then budgeted for this purpose, well, what happens is officers and detectives end up doing work that do not need to be done, by that level. That could be done by civilian staff. There are other things as well that can be done by civilian staff.
Well aware of that. I work with that every day. I'm just curious as to how, the amount of money that we are talking about, how many positions are we going to be able to affect versus these other items and their impact.
So if I could say, as far as budget items, they can't hire people. So the money is budgeted for salaries. This is to free up police because they're not using the money for salaries because they can't hire the people. So it's not even additional money. It's money that's not being used, that's earmarked for salaries.
I'm sorry, Susan, I didn't follow that. There's money that's.
So this is not in addition. This is not saying we want civilians in addition to the police. What we're saying is the police are unable to fill their positions in a very serious manner. And so there is money that is budgeted for headcount that's not being used because they're not able to hire.
And they're not able to hire because people are unwilling.
Because people don't want to be police. Every agency is short-staffed. Police are particularly short-staffed. There is tremendous, without going into why on anything, there is tremendous morale problems. We just had in the 7th precinct, the commanding officer just quit, just like he just retired, just like that. So they are not able to hire because people do not want to be police.
Okay, so how is civilian staff for NYPD going to address that problem?
They will free up police officers who are now doing bureaucratic tasks.
So it is about hiring staff, but not officers. So it's asking them to. Well, you say that there is money. I mean, I really have missed.
They're hiring civilians. They're hiring civilians because to do work that would then free up police who are doing administrative work to do police work.
They are, or they would?
No, they would be. This is what they would be.
Okay. All right, the explanation needs to be a little tighter then, but we don't have to work on that tonight.
No.
What number do other committee members feel we ought to put that at? It's slotted in at 5 now. Should it move up? Above increased litter basket service?
I would rank it I would move civilian staff up above increased litter basket service.
I agree.
How many guesses we have for that? Actually, you know what? Let's do this let me do this as a, how high do you want it to go? And then keep your hand up if it's, some people might not want it to go. Yeah, I'd have to start at the top. Before I go to something complicated, Kenyelle and David have both raised their hands. Were they trying to say they want to move it above increased litter basket?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make a comment.
Okay, let's just do it that way. Do we want to move it above increased litter basket? Again, go ahead, raise your hand if you're in favor of doing that. There are 7 of us here. 1, 2, 3. There are 6 of us here.
You
Sorry, there are.
Lee can't vote.
And Lee cannot vote. So, well, he can present not vote, which doesn't count either way. Okay, so that means there are 6 of us who are voting on this. And I'm going to vote in favor of doing it too. So move that 5 above 4. Well, I'll just ask, is there interest in moving it higher?
I'm comfortable with it there.
Let's turn our attention to the curbside
Same.
composting. Kenyelle?
Same, I like it where it's at, it's cool.
Okay. Curbside composting.
I would suggest making that number 2.
Committee? Is anyone in favor of making it higher than 6? Kenyelle, is that your hand up to say yes?
No, I didn't take it down before, sorry.
Can I say, if we have composting, we're going to have a lot less garbage. All these other issues are about not being able to keep up with garbage. Composting would decrease the amount of garbage, because we did have it pre-COVID and it did decrease the amount of garbage tremendously.
So we can make it number 5?
We could
Or
move
you
it
wanted
up,
to go
yeah.
higher than that, Susan?
I would make it number 2. I think it is a plan. They're doing it in other boroughs. They're not doing it here. And it's,
So they're doing it in Queens.
they're doing it in Queens, and they're doing it in certain other pilot sections. It is, I cannot understand why they're not doing it here.
Is there not many NYCHA people know how to compost, and NYCHA developments are just plagued with trash?
This is for all of Manhattan. It's not NYCHA. It's for
what?
everybody. It's for schools. It's for, my building used to have composting. It's for everybody in the world.
You're right, you're right. So how about 3?
Above 3?
Yeah.
Committee, I'd be in favor of doing that, at least that high. I used to run the basket at a community garden. We had it outside the gate, and there was huge demand to use it that I had to I had to repeatedly empty it and hold it until the collection came around. It was very successful. They had facilities, they must still have them, for doing the composting. What they do is they have a separate trash pickup. Anything has been put in the compostable bags is brought to the facility, and it composts pretty rapidly. They're doing an industrial compost system, and then they use that in the parks and the gardens, etc. It does reduce the amount of garbage in the regular waste management stream.
I agree. I'm in favor for composting as well.
And buildings do have to opt in. In any case, it used to work well. They just haven't fired it up again post-COVID. So putting it into the 3rd position, is there any other support for that? Kenyelle and me? Is there support for moving it into the 4th position between 3 and 4 here?
It seems like no one has an opinion on it.
Well, now I'm doing the fill in the blank thing. It's basically, I'm considering that Kenyelle and I are both now voting for moving it into between 3 and 4. If we can get another, how many?
I think there's value in moving curbside composting higher because it just realistically, I mean, Susan, you've done this process many times, but it seems feasible. I think we have more to gain because like you said, we'll resolve a lot of these issues, not that one, but with composting. I think it makes sense to put it at maybe at 2 or 3.
And not only is it feasible, they have all the materials, they have everything they need in storage.
Yeah. I would put it at 3, which I think Kenyal said as well.
3. That's 3 of us.
Yes.
3, and there are 2 others. There are 5. Richard's here as well. Oh, Lee, I don't know. Do you think you can vote on this or not? It is relative to your other. Lee, would you still present not vote?
I think because it will push down the other items, so I think I'm still present not voting.
Okay, so we just need the 3 of the 4. So let's move it up between 2 and 3.
I'm happy with this list as it is. I'll renumber it obviously, but with this 1 through 6 as they're written here.
So the top 4 are to help with the stop feeding the rats. And the 5th one as well, but okay. Is there any other change that committee wants to make for this?
You said 6, what's 5, what's number 6?
Well,
I just have them numbered wrong here. Let me just resolve it.
Okay. So it's
It's
rat
4.
mitigation, sanitation, curbside.
So let's do the 6. So that would be what we'll send up. We'll have a vote.
Four sanitation. 5 is civilian staff. And litter basket is 6. Okay.
Right. We haven't voted, but that's what's before us as a motion. Can we look at the capital expense ones? So the capital expenses, we have a lot more that we can add. We never run out, but still, obviously, prioritization is still important. And this is the one from last year, and there's no suggested new ones.
No. None of the agencies are involved with have that much capital. Most of the capital are parks.
Well, yeah, I talked last year. I'll say the same thing. That is a terrible stretch of the bike lane network. It's terrible. When it rains, there's a pond that they call it a ponding condition. So there's a ponding condition. It's bad, really bad.
Last year, DOT suggested that we put this in our priorities.
Anyone against it? Anybody want to modify it? I think we're ready to vote on the whole package then. That would be the district needs, these 6 expense priorities, and that capital priority.
Could you break out the expense so that I can vote on?
Oh,
do you mind?
How can we do?
Or if not feasible.
Why don't you just vote yes on district needs and capital, present not voting on it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, ready for a roll call vote, David?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
No, let me say, I don't really. It's up to you, Lee. I mean, the fact is, you're answerable to that board if they were to make an issue, or anyone were to make an issue. So it's kind of up to you if you want to do that.
So
I find it a little odd.
We just had a training in it this month, and according to the training, he cannot vote on the expense.
They consider that
Because he works for the agency.
His salary in some
It's
way.
not optional. It is, we just had the training. It's on our video.
And they specifically talked about budget priority items and rankings.
No, they talked about voting, anything. If you work for an agency, Lee cannot vote on anything to do with NYPD.
Anything to do with it. All right.
Anything.
Good. Joshua Waterman, yes. Lee Berman,
yes, except present, not voting on the expense budget. Thank you.
Okay. Kenyal Hernandez,
Yes.
Michelle Cooper Smith,
Yes.
David Louis had to drop off, Richard Robiak,
Yes.
and David Crane.
Yes.
Great.
And let me look back at the agenda. That is the end of it. So let's vote to adjourn, which is our final roll call. So take the vote.
You
We'll
got
make
it.
us How to vote. We now know, we do know who was here. So the meeting is adjourned unless
Wow,
there's
Susan.
no
Susan
objection.
left in a hurry.
We're adjourned.
See you guys.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.